Thank you. So the next item on our agenda for tonight is to approve tonight's agenda. Are there any questions or comments from the council on the agenda? All right, seeing none, are there any public comments regarding tonight's agenda? Anything anyone would like to change or? Well, we can't add at this point, but we could add for the future. Okay, so I see no public comments. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and next step then is we're moving right along to our council reports, our committee assignments. So let me start, I guess, to my. I don't think we've had minutes for today, this meeting.
Yeah, we have.
get-
Yes, there are minutes.
Okay, when were they posted? Because I checked last night and they were not posted. Okay, neither Katie nor I could find them, so. Yes, can we, yeah, do you guys mind if we do these on the next meeting side? I have. Do we need a motion to move that to the next meeting? Okay. Thanks, good catch, Jack. All right, so council reports, committee assignments. Jack West, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm going to talk about our trail committee meeting. We didn't have a full quorum, so we couldn't make any decisions. We did go over the concerns about Park Creek and actual linger trails that we are following, but right now we really don't have anything we're working with. We would certainly like to see those. That was sort of the thrust of the whole meeting because people were very concerned about what's happening. So we did discuss that. We are going to continue to work more on trying to get posts. At least we have posts out for the summer, and we're going to hopefully get a hold of the state park and try to get some signage. So we're also going to have part of the meeting tonight is going to continue discussing trail committee issues, but it was a little frustrating not to have a forum where we could actually accomplish things. See that the future holds for our trail committee.
Thank you. Steve, do you have anything?
I attended the Redwood Region Economic Development. We had a presentation from the Humboldt Growers Association regarding the initiative that's, I believe it's on the March ballot regarding cannabis. And then we'll also have a presentation from the proponents of the referendum. So I encourage folks to really do their due diligence and researching. Not so much to sway you one way or the other, but I think there's a lot of information that's coming out that we'll find later is going to be cleared up. So I think there's a lot of, it's on us to really research this one because it will have long lasting effects in our community. And then Humboldt Transit Authority, I did not attend.
Right. And I attended the Humboldt County Association of Governors or Governments, April 20th. And there were really only two topics that were, I think, relevant to Trinidad. One was the Great Redwood Trail, and that's proceeding and going well. And for those who don't know, that's a 360-mile rail to trail from San Francisco to the Humboldt Bay. I'm sure most people have heard about it by now. And then that May is Bike Month. So anyone who's interested in knowing all the activities for May's Bike Month can go to bikemonthhumboldt.org. And there's a celebration and expo May 20th in Eureka, Jefferson. Well, I have everything. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to move on to staff reports. So I'll turn it over to you, Eli.
Okay. And I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Call.
Okay.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So, excuse me. Sorry I missed last month's meeting. Stats for this month. We have a total of 193 calls for service. Again, this is the greater Trinidad area. These stats are not limited to the city limits proper. That was up just a few calls from 187 calls for service that were received or taken or created in March. Total of 14 reports taken, which was up about 5 from the previous month. We had 3 arrests, 2 felony investigations, and 2 misdemeanor investigations. We had 1 reported assault, 2 thefts, 4 general disturbances, 3 trespass or prowler calls. And these are all pretty close on par with the previous month. We had 10 alarm calls, 39 patrol checks, which would also include any foot patrols or business checks of the area. 3 pedestrian checks, 4 suspicious person calls or vehicles, 7 unwanted subjects or camping type calls, and then 4 traffic stops or vehicle investigations, with a total of 115 other miscellaneous calls. The only thing I think that I can add is a lot of those stats were generally on par with last month. Not any huge changes, with the exception of the patrol checks, which were up considerably from 7 in March to the 39 number that I provided for April. The only other thing I wanted to address is that I know 2 or 3 months ago in the meeting, it was inquired about providing stats for trying to hone those down to the city of Trinidad itself for stats, and not including those outlying areas, just to get a gauge of the difference in the calls for service as it pertains to the city itself. I do have one of our analysts has been providing those numbers to me. She's gone in and kind of better mapped through our CAD system, the city itself, to try and cut out some of those outlying area calls. Those numbers for the month of April were a total of 60 calls. Some of those categories that are included in that are similar or same title as the categories for the stats that we have historically provided. However, some of them are not. So I need to work with her a little bit further to see if maybe she can try and more align those types of calls with what you guys have historically received, so I can kind of compare better to see what kind of a number difference and where that lines out in there. But of those ones that were of a similar call type, for the most part, they were pretty similar numbers to those overall stats that were provided. But obviously, given with the total number on here, again, without having those kind of lined out to be a little more in line with each other, the fact of the total call number of 60 versus 193 obviously shows a bit of a disparity in the calls for service. So definitely there's plenty of calls that are outside of close but outside of Trinidad proper, but I'm kind of trying to work with her on that to try and give you guys a little bit more of a specific report for the city itself, but have it kind of in line with what we've been providing so we can compare those numbers.
Thank you. And thank you, Lieutenant McCall, for doing that call out to just specific things around Trinidad, because I know that was something that was requested at a past council meeting. Are there any other council questions for any other council questions for Lieutenant McCall before we go into the staff report? And then we'll open to public comment. So Eli, do you want to?
Yeah. Just going to note that we happen to have our Prince team here, Becky and Angela, and specifically last St. Angela's report, I did mention that Angela has come back to the city. So she used to be Angela Zetter, now she's Angela Kaplan.
Okay, that's
That could happen. So in the report, I do mention water tank pipeline grant project. We had gotten $5 million for that, but the engineer's estimate was running close to $7 million. So we talked to funders, and they just basically said that they were within their means. So we're having our engineers look at it again and try to see what we can work with. Size of the tank to the pipelines, and the second thing mentioned are the dogs, and the statement that I made in here is unfortunately another dog and owner were attacked by an off-leash dog last week. The 3 incidents that have occurred since last fall have similarities. The dogs that attacked were not being walked by the owners, got loose from the house and car when the door was open or holding the fence. Third, the pet owner should be vigilant when doors are open. Owners should place the leash on a dog before the door is open. Our city has dogs of all different types, and the best way to avoid injuries to have dogs under the control of the owners with the leash. Leash signs have been placed all around town to remind residents and also notify visitors. And the good news is we had Pacific Coast Security got started this week, and at least the head of Pacific Coast Security, Gene, said that all the dogs that he saw were on leashes. So that part of it is good. It's just that, and I know it's the same thing that happens with almost anyone that has a dog. You know, like for instance, if we get a UPS package delivered or something, as soon as we open the door, you got to be careful your dog doesn't go running out because they're caged in the house for such a long period of time. So if we can get that addressed, that would be great. And the dog licenses were mentioned because we know we have more dogs than the ones that are licensed. And Cheryl and had been talking about it with me, and then also Katie. And Katie wanted to address her idea.
Okay, thank you, Eli. It's just an idea. I think the people I've talked to in town, they see the little signs, which personally I like, but they say, is that's going to help us? No. So I think that we have to have something of a project going, reaching out to the residents around dog issues. And one way to do it, I think, would be to have a sort of a a licensing push. Like you say, many of the dogs are not licensed, with a friendly letter going out saying, hey, come on, guys, we got to pull together. We got to get all our dogs licensed, and we need up-to-date rabies certificates or information, and something done very soon that goes out to the whole community, and to call to their attention that these things keep happening, and that many people are getting nervous. I know a lot of women in town who are starting to carry tasers and sticks, and so I just think that rather than we're waiting on maybe reviewing the ordinances and seeing if we can get tougher ordinances when there are infractions. But I think a little PR work about the licensing would be in the same direction. Then just as a sort of a tag on, Ted Peace, who was, as you know, was bitten, sent this to me. I don't know who else saw it. This was in color. Anyhow, it's a very cute sign. It was from some community somewhere. But I think if we include this with our licensing and say, we put our signs around and they're very official looking, but they're also kind of small. This, please, your dog's friendly, but maybe the next dog doesn't want it in its nose or whatever else it goes. And so, just something that keeps reaching out to our community around the issues of dogs so that it's really foreground. Because those little signs, while they are nice and they're unobtrusive, which is great, they're not going to do the thing. So that's why I think moving on the licensing would be another reach out. Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, and I know Cheryl had mentioned about maybe a door-to-door campaign through the city to make sure that everyone who has a dog, including tenants beyond owners,
Yeah.
be aware.
Yeah, I thought since we sent out a letter, maybe it's time to go to the next step, and we could go door to door. And Jennifer Higginen had a good idea for a door hanger. So I just thought maybe we do the licensing application and some sort of a kind of a good neighbor type dog notification that says, not only keep your dog on leash, but dogs should not be at large in the city. So they can't be, even in your yard. If they're going to run out, they can't be, loose. So.
Right.
So I don't know, since this is a staff report item, we don't need necessarily to approve anything like that.
No, I mean, something like that is basically done on an administrative level. But I think that that is a good process to follow. So working between you and Jennifer and whoever else, Katie and so on, whoever else wants to be
We can
a
walk around.
volunteer, and we can give that a try and see how that works.
That's excellent. We'll get our steps in.
Good. Yeah, it's exercise at the same time.
Exercise at the same time.
Yeah. I do mention a few other things in the manager's report. So in addition to that, the Chamber of Commerce is going to have the first mixer at Moonstone Crossing Winery on Thursday, May 18th at 5:30. So whoever is interested in participating there. Also, the Chamber in June on Summer Solstice Day, which would be June 21st, will be having Taste of Trinidad in Saunders Park like they did last year. So those two events are coming up. The other one that Jennifer is working on behalf of the city is the Forest Moon Festival. So that's being sponsored by the Film Commission that covers Del Norte and Humboldt County. And that will be for Friday, June 2nd and Saturday, June 3rd. Saturday, June 3rd also is our yard sale. So that has been highlighted as part of this event. So anyone who's interested in seeing Return of the Jedi, which has its 40th anniversary. So Friday, June 2nd at Cal Poly Humboldt in their JVD theater, customers can arrive at 1 p.m. and the show will be at 2 p.m. And these are free because I don't think you can, they're free screenings. So because of the arrangement with Lucasfilms to re-show the movie, we can't be making money on it. So as a result, it is a free, showing of Return of the Jedi. Also on Saturday, June 3rd at the Mateel, and also at Sequoia Park at 7:30 p.m. for customers, and then the show begins at 8:45 p.m. And there's a website called forestmoonfestival.org. So you can check that out and get all the times and whatever events are happening around both counties during those 2 days, which this is supposed to become an annual event. So that's all I have. So I can entertain any questions.
Right, any other questions for Eli on the staff report?
I am curious about this water tank. So we are going to build smaller tanks. We're going to get more grant money. What's the, I'm just curious what the,
So
I know it's early, but what's
sure.
your thought?
Yeah, so we have our team, which includes both Becky and Angela, and then includes Steve Allen from GHD and a couple other people from GHD and myself. So one thing that was mentioned was possibly instead of a 300,000 gallon tank, maybe a 250,000 gallon tank, and that we would again seek future funding for another 250,000 gallon tank. So we'd end up with 500,000 altogether. In talking with the water plant and with Phil Godman from Coleman Engineering, what they're doing is they're trying to turn over the water in the tanks, like basically within 4 days, so that this way the water stays fresh, doesn't stagnate. So certainly if we had 500,000 total instead of 600,000, that will help work with that. So that's one way. The other way is that the Cadillac model is the stainless steel water tank, and that's the most expensive. So as a result, if we went to some other versions of steel tanks, that will cut down the cost. So we're looking at what else would work because of our coastal environment and to make sure that it works well in our coastal environment.
And if I'm not mistaken, quite a bit of money was needed to also prepare the site, the road up and whatnot. I'm assuming those are fixed costs.
Yeah, those are fixed
Regardless of
costs.
how big the tank is, we need to do those improvements.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and initially regarding the water line from the tanks to the plant and vice versa, originally they were planning 2 lines, one going to the tanks and one coming back from the tanks. So now they're cutting it down to 1. And then the other possibility is, although we would like to see the Van Wyck water line moved to Edwards, that's about $500,000, so it's maybe possible to push that off and then seek another grant. So we're looking at various options, so we'll see what the engineers come up with.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I'm fairly sure we could request, 100,000 or so that, if it's a little bit over, because they indicated that even though we live within our means, that they were able to help fund something that was minor increase, but they just cannot handle a major increase.
Thank you.
And then I don't know, Becky or Angela have anything to add to that?
The magic pots of money.
And Trevor's online because she's participated also, so.
I'm surprised it went up by 40%. I mean, that's a lot from the original
Yeah.
estimates.
Yeah.
So, and then we have another grant here, the boardwalk, the park grant, which
Right.
I understand is expiring at the end of this year.
Right.
Is there any, I mean, that's a much smaller issue,
Right.
the pickleball court versus the water tanks, but I'm just curious if there's if that money is at risk at all, because I know we also want to replace the board. So,
Yeah. Well, again, our grants, the staff is working on that also. We've had specifically, I mentioned the boardwalk because we had a meeting regarding that. But we're going to be having another meeting coming up shortly just to go over the tennis court and the pickleball court. But that already needed quite a bit of extra paperwork to help identify that the city actually owned it and so on and so forth. So what we'll do is try to keep those two moving. But I don't see, a problem. I think, we just have to keep moving. I know Becky is, once we get everything lined up for the boardwalk, we'll have the approval, hopefully, because we're modifying some things and it's not just a maintenance thing. So it's really going to become more of a trail for us to help supplement our trail system. And the different material and the fact that it is formally going to become a trail, I think will hopefully fall into place with the grant.
excellent, thank you. All right, are there public comments about the staff report that folks would like to offer up? Okay.
And anything to add, Becky, or is that sort of covered? Okay, good, thanks.
All right, I see no comments online, so we will, thank you, Eli, thanks very much, and Lieutenant McCall, I guess, as well. So I think, all right, so next up are items from the floor. And at this point, members of the public can speak for generally up to 3 minutes on items that are not on tonight's agenda.
Good evening, everybody. Aaron Aiken, MU Avenue resident speaking tonight. Just have 4 things for you. Just wanted to kind of raise them, bring it back up to the light of day. One is the city is going forward with more construction projects. I would like to request maybe that as items go out for bid and there's a storage component in various locations throughout the city, I'm thinking of the field behind Murphy's from the groundwater storage. I think it would be really nice for our community if we required screening. There's the chain link fence to secure their materials, which is totally understandable, but just that netting. Just add that into the bid so it's a requirement, so it's an anticipated cost. I think that would go a long way, just with our visual clutter in the city for residents and visitors alike. The second thing, just suggesting that the city revisit the AV setup for meetings. Hybrid is here to stay. I think we all kind of accept that, at least for the planning commission and the council meeting. And as somebody that has been on both sides of the fence, both on Zoom, in person, it's lacking. It's great. It worked. It got us through COVID. I think it's time to really kind of take stock of, is this the right thing going forward? The staff kind of set up that kind of stuff. We'll defer to them. But I can tell you personally, having watched meetings after the fact, which I know staff does to review minutes, the audio quality just isn't there sometimes to clarify things, and that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I just want to bring that up. Last 2 things. One, a reminder that I believe when the contract for the security services was approved, there was discussion about developing metrics to determine the efficacy of the program. Just bring that back to your attention. And then the last thing, looking for an update on the traffic calming measures. I thought that was going to be a standing agenda item, so just curious where that is and want to make sure that keeps moving forward. It doesn't get lost because I know there's a lot of stuff. Books. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And I'll just echo your comments, Aaron, on the AV setup. I noticed one of the meetings I had to leave and then I was watching from home and the audio and video wasn't quite up to par. And I know it's a challenge because we have a limited budget as well, but I just echo that. On the security services, I'll pull some metrics together and absolutely.
I'm just curious on the audio. Would it, I mean, we do our best to keep people talking into the microphone, but is that the issue? Is it, were you able to tell during meetings, is it when discussion is kind of going around the room when we can hear it, but we can't, we're not making people come back to the microphone?
My experience has been kind of a combination, having participated on the planning commission officially in a Zoom capacity, missing some discussion. This was not the best. And then just listening on the recording, just missing audio.
Okay.
It just, if one person talks and the other person's talking, you just miss things.
Okay.
I know there are better systems out there. I know there's a cost issue, but might be time to revisit it.
And we can do a better job of reminding ourselves to talk into the microphone.
Yes, and coming, it's the reason that we make people come up to the podium too, and I'm not sure that's always clear, so we can mention.
The other issue that we've dealt with is just the fact that the integrity of the town hall. It's really historic, this room and the building. And certainly, we have a number of events here and you don't want to take away from that character too much. So, there's a certain point where we looked at it before and it was like, you're hanging cameras and doing so on. And then all of a sudden it just looks a little bit out of place. So yeah, we take all of that into consideration.
And then traffic calming, I think, is on a future.
Yeah, traffic calming, we had Josh Wolf, and we said that the next time that Josh would be addressing us, so that would be coming up either next month or the month after, but as soon as, and he is already preparing a few things to help address on that. So this way we can have something to really talk about when he comes back.
Right. Other public comments? All right, I see no more items from the floor, so we will move on then with our tonight's consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments from the council on the consent agenda? I'm not going to recommend pulling the budget because we're going to talk about budget, but I do remain concerned about our water spend. We're about 325,000 over and 375,000 last year, so that's $700,000. I think we're all pretty well aware of why that is. But when we get to the point where we're talking about budget in the next few weeks, I think we need to talk about what can we do or can we do more to shore that up going forward. I know there's not much we can do about the past, but yeah. So other than that editorial comment, I have a need to pull anything. So if there are no other comments from the council, then let me go to the public. Are there any changes or things you'd like to see pulled out? Right. No public comments with regard to the consent agenda. So is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve consent.
That's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I should note, I don't know if we mentioned this, that Jack Tuttle, our other counselor, is not here, but because we have four, we have a quorum. So forgot to mention that Jack couldn't join us tonight. All right, so the first agenda item for tonight then is our discussion or decision to appoint 2 council members to participate in a government-to-government consultation with the Trinidad Rancheria. Eli, did you want to walk us through that discussion?
Yeah, the B2G consultations, according to our city attorney, would be, of course, you have a quorum of the council, so it would be 2, and also to have them approved each time we do them separately, so it's not a standing committee. It becomes a standing committee if the same 2 people are meeting repeatedly. And then the Brown Act doesn't want to have these meetings with 2 members of the council to be a standing committee. So as a result, that's why we have it on the agenda. So the rancheria, and I know they've talked also to Becky, but basically, there's a couple things that they're asking to have addressed. So this way gives us an opportunity to meet with them.
Do we know what those topics are in general, or?
So it's one of the coastal resilience, is that one of them, or is that going to be a separate meeting with them? Yeah, sure, come on.
I was just curious because I think the topics may influence who we.
So I'm not, there is going to be a meeting, staff to staff meeting with the rancheria, hopefully this next week. But Jackie mentioned to me that she had requested or was requesting a government to government, and she didn't specify the topics.
Okay. Thank you.
And one of the topics, of course, is their stormwater project, which will be happening this summer. And then another topic would be just to talk about the trail system too. I know those two for sure.
All right, does anyone want to?
And you and I attended last.
Yes, we
time.
attended last time,
So
Stephen.
just to, we really shouldn't, as a council, have at least both of us go again, because then it's becoming a standing committee. I think one of us might go just because we have such small
Do I
numbers.
understand that it's going to be two different people from the council each time?
It just can't be the same two every time.
So one of us could go,
One of
the
us
other
could go.
not, and I'm comfortable opting out on this time around. I've attended, I think, the last two. If Katie or Jock would like to.
And I'm happy to go for consistency, but only just because of.
Well, considering I really don't know what I'm doing, it'd be a good idea.
Well, then we'd have two
You know
people.
what
that go.
Yeah, right. And then Katie, just to let you know, they do meet during the day, although they may be meeting on Friday for this next one. I mean, it could be Friday. I saw that it was mentioned in an email. Trevor might have caught that, but I think it was mentioned in the email about Friday, which would be the 19th, I believe, whatever that Friday is of that week.
And I'll tell you that I would not like going there. So Katie, if you wanted to go, if it's a Friday, I don't know if it's not a Friday, would that be?
The 19th.
I think that's a Friday.
It is.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I can do that.
All right, so the approach that we're suggesting is that it will be Katie Breckenridge and Steve Ladwick and Jack Weston.
Okay.
Are there any public comments on that proposal? All right, seeing none, do we need to vote on that?
Sure.
Okay. I'll move to approve what I just described.
I'll second on what you just said.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. All right, let's move to item number 2 on time. We're just really rocking and rolling here. Okay, so discussion decision regarding the first reading of ordinance 2023-01, which is adding housing related definitions and allowable uses as required by state law and the Trinidad housing element to sections of the zoning ordinance. So Eli, do you want me to turn that over to Trevor?
Yeah, we'll turn it over to Trevor. She can.
All right.
This one.
All right, hi Trevor.
Good evening. Thank you. So this should look, this and the next item should both look familiar to you, although you haven't seen this one since September of last year. So just as a quick overview and reminder, the city has an adopted housing element. It's one of the 7 state required elements, and it's the one that's most specifically dictated by state law. And it's the only one that has to be certified by a state agency, which is the Housing and Community Development Director, other than our LCP, of course. The city receives a couple of grants to implement portions of the housing element and to increase housing opportunities in Trinidad. So this ordinance amendment is related to, is a task under the LEAP grant. and it implements a couple of different policies within the housing element. So for the most part, this ordinance updates definitions in accordance with state law. So they're most of them are dictated by state law, and allows those uses as a residential use subject to only the same requirements as a single family dwelling. So mostly these are added definitions and then added allowable uses in residential zones. A couple of exceptions, family daycare homes, and was added to the home occupation section. And we also added a little bit more protective language, and allowing a slightly greater range of uses, including fishing related. There could be, home canning or something like that, home occupations, to that section. And then the single room occupancy units is the one area where the city has a little bit more leeway. They're not well defined by state law. And they're not super likely to occur in Trinidad. These are normally hotels that are converted into small housing units. But someone could potentially build some design single room occupancy units in Trinidad, obviously subject to wastewater disposal requirements would be the limiting factor. So I worked with the Planning Commission to develop some regulations surrounding single room occupancy units, including parking requirements. And there's a summary in the staff report of the various provisions. And then the ordinance shows the track changes of what is being added and deleted and changed from the zoning ordinance. One note is that I will also, so the Coastal Commission hasn't certified the city's codification of its ordinances. So we use two different numbering systems, and that was getting really unwieldy, particularly with this amendment, because the definitions in the certified zoning ordinance are in an unnumbered appendix. So I will be I'm working with the city attorney on what we call it, because it's not a zoning ordinance amendment for the city, because it's just sort of accepting what has already been codified in the city's ordinances. And that's going to be submitted to the Coastal Commission along with these ordinances, so we can get that numbering system codified so that we only have to use one from here on out. I think that covers most of this one. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just have a quick follow-on on the codification. So is the idea that now you're kind of mapping the new codes to old codes? I see. And you just want one set of code numbers. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Aaron, the head of our planning commission is here. Would you like to add anything?
No.
Okay, all right. Are there any questions from the council? All right, no questions from the council. Any questions from the public? And I remember reviewing this in the past, so I have no questions. These definitions look good. It all makes good sense. So thanks for the application or for the explanation. And
just real quick, I will add one more thing. Because this is part of the zoning ordinance, it will have to be certified by the Coastal Commission before it goes into effect. So after the second reading, I will be submitting a LCP amendment application to the Coastal Commission.
yes, and so my understanding is that tonight we are just approving the first reading. Is that correct? As on page 47 of the packet.
Yes, and then I will be preparing to go along with it with the Coastal Commission application is a resolution of LCP amendment submittal. So that will be, I will present that with the second reading of this ordinance at the next meeting or the June meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there a move to?
I move that we approve the first reading of ordinance 2023-01.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those.
Aye.
All right, so we have approved the first reading of the housing related zoning ordinance amendment. And we will move on then to item number 3 on our agenda, which is discussion decision regarding the first reading of ordinance 2023-02. So Trevor, I assume I'm going to turn that over to you for that as well.
Yeah, so this is basically the same, along the same course. So it's another housing implementation program to develop reasonable accommodation procedures, and is a task under the LEAP grant. So reasonable accommodation is when someone with a disability requests an exception to land use standards. Classic example would be a wheelchair access ramp that doesn't meet a front yard setback. And right now the city doesn't have any procedures for exceptions other than a variance, and a variance is a difficult process and doesn't work well with that. So I used examples of other reasonable accommodation ordinances. The language does seem to be fairly standard, and it's based on both federal and state fair housing laws. And this has been reviewed by the city attorney and was reviewed and recommended by the Planning Commission. And so this will add a new chapter to the zoning ordinance for a reasonable accommodation process.
Thank you.
And this will go to the Coastal Commission with the other ordinance and the codification. So they'll all go together as one application.
All right, great, thank you. Other questions for Trevor on this? All right, seeing none from the council, are there any questions from the public? Is there bring it back to the council, is there a motion?
I'll move that we re-accept the first reading of the ordinance 2023, amending chapter 17.08 and 17.58.
Second, I'll second that.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and the only other question I had is related to this, but not completely, which is, are we expecting to see any more general plan elements anytime soon to the city council?
Good question. I have just sort of working on sending out some reminders to the tribes and tribal entities to get some additional comments on the cultural resources element so we can continue moving forward on that. The safety element still continues to wait for the OPC grant. We need to get to a certain point in the OPC grant with the vulnerability assessment to start working on updating that. And I did submit revised elements, the introduction, land use, conservation, open space, recreation, circulation. I submitted all those to the Coastal Commission again, and I'm waiting for comments from them. So I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern. And then in addition, both the LEAP and the SB2 grants run out in August. So I'm trying to get those, my priority is get those completed so we can spend that money and make the most out of it while we've got it.
Okay, thank you. We're looking forward to it. Looking forward to getting more elements. Okay, the next item is the discussion decision to direct staff to begin recruitment to fill the public representative vacancy on the Trinidad Trails Committee.
Yes, so we know that we do have a vacancy for the public representative, and we want to begin the recruitment process. We like having it on the agenda for the main purpose to make it public, let people know we're looking for a public representative on the Trinidad Trails Committee. And there may be some other positions too that may need to be filled in the near future. We'll check on those, but this is the one that we're going for at this moment. And we have received a letter of resignation from Anita Thompson, who had served on the Trails Committee for a short period of time. So hopefully we can get someone else from the community who is very interested in the trails and has some ideas and suggestions.
Question. What does it entail that this person is representative. As I go around town and talk to people,
Right.
hey, great, but what are they going to?
Well, Jack is the chair and they meet basically quarterly. And then in between, that they'll go ahead and review and look at different things such as recently Jack did research on the benches in town. So I don't know if you want to add a few more.
I mean, actually, we're working to try to work mostly with signage and trying to get people ideas of where the trails are so that they can find their way around the city and develop maps, or a city map that would be a good trail map, and find out how we can tie those signs to the map and then create trails. And also we can try and create loop trails. And we picked up the bench part of it too, so we can work on the benches and trails. There's a lot of things that we're working on. So I will say that when we look at this committee, we're trying to get a committee that can meet so we can actually make some decisions and present ideas to the city council. So our job is to come up with ideas and present to the city council what we found, what we'd like to see take place. Right now, a lot of the backup is because we're still working through the actual Ingrid and Parker Creek Trail. We're trying to figure out what we can do about that, since that has now become a city council item, more of a city item than a trail committee item. So we're mostly looking at local trails and trying to develop paths up and down the coast around Trinidad and within the city.
All right, any public comments regarding the trail committee vacancy?
Before we go, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask, do we want to go into some of the other issues with the people that are on the committee? That's not what we're going to be doing now. We have some people who want to, like we have Carol Vandermeer that brought up. I thought this is the time where we could be able to identify others who want to try and get on the committee. Is that part of what we're doing now, or is it just that one?
I can turn it over to Gabe.
This is the opportunity. I would like to, because frankly, I think that last Trails Committee meeting that we had, no one was really sure what a quorum was, because they weren't sure, because some people don't attend these meetings. There's been some transfer of positions casually. And I think this process is one that the city intended to have some understanding and control of.
That's probably
during transition. So this is a great opportunity.
okay. Well, we'll just go through real quick. Let you know that who we figure is on the committee now. So the planning commission is on is John Hopkins. And we only have the one public right now, that's Tim Needham, who was here tonight. We have representative from the Trinidad Rancheria is Trina Matheson, and we'd like to get her on there to straight out. And then for Carol Vandermeer is not coming, and instead we have Zoe Ziegler, who is going to try as much as she can to be there. So the other thing is we have no real representation from the Yurok tribe because no one's attended the meeting. That's a person who's on there. We'd like to have them, but we aren't getting them. So I don't know what we can do to maybe make that work that so we can either bring a different group in or something else, or we can have a different kind of representative, or we just want to leave that open. That's a question I have that I can't answer. So I thought maybe the council, if we just want to leave it the way it is.
I recommend reaching out to Ms. Provo, who does attend some of our meetings as a representative of the Yurok tribe, and see if there's any interest from her or someone that she might be able to.
I'll attempt to get her involved.
Yeah.
But so does that catch you up, Gabe, to where we are? Is that all we need to do to put this committee back together?
Yeah, and we'll begin the solicitation of interest as mentioned in this agenda item, so we can see about getting a second public representative.
I have a question, Jim. I would think that the Yurok would be very interested in the trails and what happens. So I don't understand
Well,
why they would.
they do get a notice every time that we have a meeting. So we just haven't had any response. So it's just,
Do you have any idea what the hangup is?
since I've been on the committee and I haven't had any contact at all, so I have no idea.
Is there something we can do?
That's what,
The vice chair, I mean, he's in DC half the time, working for the tribe. So I think finding someone who's a little more available would be the best place to start. I think there's no question of commitment and interest. It's just a matter of time. So I think Ms. Provost will be able, she attends most of our meetings if she's not on, but she'd be a great resource. She's your tribal council for this region, and she would be able to recommend someone pretty quick, if not herself. I mean, she's also on lots of committees, but I'm sure there's some.
So the remedy is pursuing.
I think the only editorial comment I'll make is having served on the trail committee for at least 2 years. And I found that maybe 3 years, because it was a little bit before you, Jack, but I found that there was confusion, and this may be an agenda item more than a topic for the volunteers. Confusion between the Chirai management team and their roles and responsibilities versus the Trails Committee. And so what we often got locked up on decision making, and because we had to defer to the Chirai management team. And so I think the city needs to kind of think through how we can empower the Trail Committee to make decisions, or if we can. Because I do see a lot of volunteers, I'll just be super transparent. I see a lot of volunteers coming and going on the Trails Committee because they get frustrated, and it's not due to any lack of leadership in the chairs. Or, I mean, I was a vice chair at one point, so I guess I'm saying that we had leadership then, but we just couldn't make decisions. And we wrote a trail policy. I think a lot of good work has been jacked in an exhaustive kind of bench inventory. Anita and I and Carol Vandermeer did a signage inventory and updated all that. So I think the committee has worked pretty hard, but there's something that's stopping us from getting anything done. So I'm just going to be super transparent about that. And I think we should really decide kind of what the role is, and how we can empower them.
if I add to that,
Yes.
this is why I think a lot of times when the committees comes in frustrated, because we don't have, there's some things we need to have done, and we know that. And we can't seem to get past the point of either getting signage done, or there's a consistent signage. What is the goal that we want to reach? How do we get there if we have two different groups trying to do the same thing? So yes, it is a tough committee, and it's not that they don't, everybody cares. We all want to see this done, but we just don't see any movement. And so it is, something needs to step in. By the way, to get Zoe did come to the last meeting, and she really gave us some great ideas, and some hope that we can get some things done. But it's still kind of in the hands of the trail management team in order to start making decisions about these big trails to connect these things and do something. Yes, it is frustrating with the committee. It's frustrating because we still seem to be making progress, and it would be really nice to see this changed. So, yeah,
Well, I
there's a
mean,
way to do that. Please help us out.
yeah, you've worked hard, and I'm disappointed to see that you didn't even have a quorum at the last meeting. So
And I was disappointed that we didn't find the bench PowerPoints, because you could show it. We found it in front of us, and we just couldn't see it. So
Oh, no.
next time.
All right. Well, let me open. Oh, sorry. Did you have more?
So
of that?
are you proposing this as an agenda?
Yeah. I mean, I guess. What do you think, Eli? I don't know if you have a thought about, or Gabe, about the best approach. Do we agendize this and kind of talk through the roles and responsibilities? Seems like that'd be worthwhile before people spend more time.
Yeah, I'll start off first with turning it over to Gabe. Yes, certainly, looking at that can make sense and possibly, prioritize the order of input as far as, when you're trying to get it from the Trails Committee, versus any other committee or any other part of the city. The other thing I would suggest is when we do that, to look at the number makeup. And the reason I mention that is because here it's identified 8. So when you have 8, you're going to need 5. If you had 9, you still need 5. So sometimes it's better to have an odd number. And then, so either we have 9 or we drop it to 7, where you'll only need 4.
I see.
Okay, any thoughts?
Well, I think all the ingredients are there for advisory decision making. The resolution itself, I think, spells out pretty clearly what the intent in the creation of that advisory committee was designed to do. And I believe, other than just getting a quorum, I'm not sure I'm hearing that finding a majority of vote in that committee is the problem. It's what happens afterwards, right? The follow-up, is that what we're talking about? And I discussed this in previous years' budgets where there's money set aside. It's like you got the decisions, you got the money, but there's no clear path to get to the end result. Or should I say there is a path, but there are roadblocks. And I think we know what, maybe some of those roadblocks are. It's the cultural sensitivities, the complexities that surround this rail system, that the land that the trails intersect with. And I think that could be something pursued even at a council level with the commitment to seeing these things through. I think that was our main roadblock to spending some of the money. I mean, I think there's been pledges of money and pledges to come to these meetings and make decisions, but finding everyone to agree and hold hands at the end and getting these permits, whatever's required, can be the hardest.
Just that last one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there's a suggestion on the table to add it to the agenda, so we'll talk about that when we get to future topics, but let's go to public comment. I know Tim is here from the Trail Committee. Maybe you'd like to say a few things, Tim?
Well, when I was told to be the public representative on this Trails Committee, I actually thought, well, I got a shovel and a chainsaw, I can help out with that, and that sounds great. Sadly, it's become, in my short tenure, I think it's 2 years now, it's the place where optimists go to die. I mean, people come in and they've got the most positive outlook and they've got all these great ideas. And then about 3 meetings or 6 meetings on, they say, this is never going to happen. And we watch them, they stop coming, and then eventually they resign. You folks have to sort out what your goal is for the Trails Committee. I mean, do you want us to do anything? Right now, my only goal is just to make sure we don't abandon any more trails. I mean, that's not a great goal, but that's the best I can do. And I don't even know whether that's appropriate. Is that what your role is? Should that be my role as a public member of the Trails Committee? Or is even that mine? Because everything gets deferred to the Surai Management Plan and then says, well, we got to go ahead and get the Surai Management Team to agree to something. We can't even agree to what, Jack? Just putting in little stakes that say the arrows where the trails are? We can't even get that approved. So unless we allow the Trails Committee either tell us we don't have any authority at all, and I'll at least start bringing 6-packs to the meeting, or on the other hand, say you have some authority that will bring these things back to you as the council, and you'll actually make a decision. But it can't continually be deferred to Surai Management. They had this, their plan has been in effect over 17 years, and they have yet to meet even one of the criteria of that plan. I was asked about that, and he said, well, it takes time. Well, okay, but all these things are in the plan. Everything that we're trying to do is in the plan, but then we can't get them to say, yeah, that's appropriate, and go ahead and go forward.
So that's my frustration about there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Are there other public comments about the trail committee? Okay, I think just to wrap this up, and because we're going to segue, we're going to talk about specific trails, and I'm going to recuse myself for that. But my recommendation, just and Jack, I guess it's up to you as the lead, is that maybe we can do one of two things. We can have it as an agenda item to talk about just the roles and responsibilities of the two things, or we could have as an agenda item the proposal from the Trails Committee and kind of raise it up to the city council level to make some decisions. And that would give an opportunity for Taz, the Yurok tribe, the Rancheria to come in and comment on those plans. That would be another, but maybe we can discuss it, see what you guys think. What do you think, Jack?
Well, I think
All the above?
I think, I mean, if we've already sort of pushed some of these things forward, they just get pushed back. So I think that's an important thing though. I think the idea of getting it into the city council and getting it written down is something that is the goal of the city council would be a very nice way to make a step towards getting something done.
No, I would love to work with you on that anyway, if you need some help, because I have some of the stuff from prior. So
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. With that, I'm gonna step out and turn it over to Steve for the next agenda.
All righty. So the next item is number 5, discussion update regarding temporary closure of the Axel Lindgren Memorial and Parker Creek Trails to Old Home Beach. I think in reviewing the minutes from last meeting and also just from memory, there was a management team that happened right after our last council meeting. So can we get an update if any relevant information to this topic was discussed at the management?
Sure. So we had actually 2 meetings with the management team, and we have another one scheduled for, I believe, this Thursday. In between there, we also got a group together to do a site visit after one of the Churai management team meetings, where we had Trevor Parker, our planner, who's on here and she'll go over more detail, and Steve Allen, our city engineer, myself, and then we also had a person from the Huron tribe. That's Karen. Works on putting trails together. And then we had a representative from Fish and Wildlife, and we had a representative from the Coastal Commission. So this way, when we did our walkthrough, also there was Paul Gallegos from the representing the Churai management, actually the Churai Ancestral Society. So is their attorney. So from that meeting, we talked about the fact that the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail with fencing to continue to have that trail closed until some more improvements can be done. Steve Allen from GHD is also working with the Churai Ancestral Society on trying to find solutions to that particular trail. So in the meantime, to have fencing, and it is that along Parker Creek are currently closed, but just to remain having the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail closed with adequate fencing, which would be like a deer type fencing, so that people don't use that to access Humboldt Beach. But make improvements to Parker Creek Trail, and especially at the toe of the trail where there is some erosion and driftwood, and try to make it a accessible portion of the trail so that we can reopen Parker Creek Trail ideally before Memorial Day. That is the goal. And then on the beach, certain areas where there is erosion, to get jute netting to help cover that area and from the erosion, and at the same time have some of the existing material on the beach which would be some rocks and some driftwood moved into that area to help maybe stop or slow down the erosion. And the other thing that was suggested was a fence along that area. So those are the things that have been suggested or being looked at. So we have Trevor up here. And so the next step is at the next planning commission meeting, which will be next Wednesday, there will be a CDP, coastal development permit, regarding this very issue. And Trevor is preparing that for the planning commission. Basically, is the body that does the coastal development permits, and they will be able to address the two trails and the beach. Turn it over to her and she can give a little bit more detail. That'll happen next Wednesday, and then ideally we will start next Thursday doing some work. We're trying to identify the UROC crew is unavailable. We initially were hoping through our team meetings that they might be able to take the lead. They already have a number of things on their plate. So we're going to be looking at Samara Restoration out of McKinleyville that did the cell tower site in restoring that to do some work for us. And at the same time, some work from our public works group, possibly from some volunteers, in trying to find out the best way to reopen some of the Parker Creek Trail. So I'll turn it over to Trevor.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was a pretty good overview. I guess just a few things to add. We've had quite a few professional and agency people involved. As Eli mentioned, we've been meeting weekly, and we've had a lot of ideas that we've discussed and rejected for various reasons. Not everybody in the group agrees with every solution, but I think everybody wants to see something happen, and so we're all willing to compromise on what the final solution is. We don't have exact details. We have another meeting set for this Thursday. Hopefully we can kind of finalize some of those details, but some will probably be dependent on, once a work crew gets down there, and what they can see and what they can place. So, and coastal commission has been involved. They're also supportive of taking some action, but also, getting Parker Creek Trail open. They definitely have significant concerns about trail closures, including Axel Lindgren Trail. But I think as long as we get Parker Creek Trail open, which we're still planning on doing by Memorial Weekend, then I think they are on board. So kind of a conglomerate of actions that we're taking to try and keep people away from the sensitive areas and creating more disturbance is the bottom line. Everything is temporary. Just want to emphasize that as well. Anything that we're going to be placing on the beach is going to have to be monitored periodically after high tide events, and will need to be removed probably sometime between Labor Day and the end of September. So before winter storms come, all that material will have to be removed. The fencing on the Axel Lindgren Trail would be proposed to remain as long as that's closed. And like Eli said, we are, or people are actively working on finding solutions for a good repair for the base of that trail.
Very good. I assume with all projects, we have a cultural monitor in place. that we would have a cultural monitor in place for these activities? And is that something that would, as I understand it, the city can afford that because we have the money set aside for trail reparations, and so that's included in this work that we're talking about? Is that
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely want to have cultural monitors, but I would hope that at least in this case, that the cultural monitors maybe could be paid for by their respective agency, because the city is going to be footing the bill for whatever improvements.
Okay.
So I hate that, pay for the improvements and to pay for the cultural monitors. So I'm hoping that somehow they can work it out from their end.
But this is really all contingent or able to move forward because we have that money set aside for trail repair, and that's where this is coming from. So we're not going to get to the point where we have work to do, but all of a sudden we don't have any money because we do have this. Okay.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Questions from the council for either Trevor or Eli? Katie?
Trevor's Katie Breckenridge. You said that things had to be removed right after Labor Day. What things are you talking about?
Yeah, so that would be the barriers on the beach. So at this point, the consensus seems to be some sort of slow slatted fencing, so maybe 3 or 4 feet high. What we're looking at is called sand fencing, although it's not going to function to capture sand like it's intended to do. It's more sort of like a picket fence. We're looking at placing that along the bluff from, again, we don't know the exact length, but somewhere around the base or a little west of the Axel Lindgren Trail up to about 300 feet to the east. And it's going to be located right at the toe of the bluff where the sand ends and sort of the rocky toe begins, is where the fence will be placed. And then between the fence and the toe of the bluff, and then up the toe of the bluff where there's been erosion and exposure of soils, we're going to place jute matting. And then on top of that, to the extent possible, placing rocks, driftwood, down vegetation, and other materials that are already occurring on the beach to sort of cover that area, and then place signage saying that it's to keep out, it's under restoration. So the idea is to keep people away from the base of the bluff and those sensitive areas.
Jack, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Steve Ivey was saying about the money, and we looked at repairing the steps just to the head, and I don't know if that's changed, but that was just to fix those was over $10,000. So when we start looking at these trails and trying to repair them, I believe we have $30,000 set aside, but it's still it goes really fast. I mean, it's amazing how much it costs just to do this little bit of work. And we still have the cost on those steps to the Trinidad.
They haven't given me the formal bid, but I agree with you. It's probably going to be around 10,000. So that would leave us around 20,000.
So the money's going to go fast, and and when you look at the actual Lindgren Trail and what they have to do with the base of that, that's going to be a tremendous amount of money. So I think there's a lot to consider in doing these things, and that's one of the problems with the trails too. It's just that they're a lot more expensive than you might think. So we've got to keep looking at ways of funding these trails if we're going to continue to upgrade them and make them.
Any comments from the public? I'll move to the public.
As you're getting up here, I just want to make one more comment. So I have a concern with the fencing. Hopefully, once we figure it all out and the weight of it, how much space it entails, it'll work out. But I just have a concern that, since we will have to remove it like in September roughly, where do we put it? We're not a big city that has a large, maintenance yard and so on. So, and certainly the Coastal Commission doesn't want us to keep it anywhere near the beach because they don't want it to end up in the bay. So that's a concern that I do have. But once we have identified the material and hopefully the size of it, maybe it might be manageable. But I just wanted to note that area of concern.
Good to keep in mind.
Patty Fletcher, one of the colleagues. When you named the folks who were evaluating the situation down there, and you mentioned that Paul Gallegos was representing the Europe tribe, and Steve Allen and the Europe tribe came.
No, so Paul Gallegos was represented in Chura Settings.
Right, I got that.
And then Rick Nelson is the person who handles trails and for the Europe tribes.
And for as long as, I don't know, at least 20, 30 years, maybe, one of the consistent state people involved with keeping trails open has been Sue Corbally with the California Coastal Conservancy. And she's been pretty passionate, been for a number of times, and been passionate about easements and making, and her highest priority being keeping public access open. So is she playing any role in any of this? Because they, in the past, they've had funds to advocate for what they want, which is open public trails. So is Sue Corbally been involved at all in this process?
Yes, yeah, Sue Corbally and the California Coastal Conservancy are part of the Chura management team. So she meets with the Chura management team when it works for her schedule. Ideally, when we do have these meetings, we try to schedule them like a month or so in advance and make sure everyone can attend, and then she's able to attend. But now that we're doing this on a weekly basis to keep this process moving, she is attending when she's available. At the last meeting, she wasn't available.
And who else is on the Chura management team?
On the Chura management team, specifically when we went on the site visit, we were trying to just have representatives from each group, rather than having like 3 or 4 from each one. So specifically on the Chura management team, we do have both Kelly and Sarah Lindgren, who are from the Chura Ancestral Society. We have Sue Corbally from the Coastal Conservancy. We have a representative from the Yurok tribe, which sometimes is Rosie Claiborne, and sometimes could be Melody Meyer, and sometimes could be Sharon. And we also have the representative from the city, which I'm always there. And then as needed, we have our city planner and city engineer. So Trevor.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then Steve Allen is involved as the city engineer.
City engineer, right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just to note that normally the California Coastal Commission is not part of these meetings, but we have them involved in these emergency meetings so we can expedite the process and make sure that we're getting their input. Because as Trevor had mentioned, and will be happening next Wednesday, we need to do the coastal development permit. So we basically need their blessing, and if we didn't have the press at the meetings, it'll slow down that process. And we really want to open the trail of both, but at least one of them, so we have each access by Memorial Day, because we know that we're going to be having a number of visitors by then. And ideally, we'll have a way to point people that this is the way to go down to the beach.
And this may be too subjective a question, but y'all remember, well, we don't all remember, we remember very fondly Axel Lindgren Jr. and his desire to keep the Chura village not open. I would say that's to make it to honor it,
Right.
and for its existence, and not to close off access.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if people on the Chura management teams, so I think the Axel Lindgren Jr. Memorial Trail sign is gone. I think it's been removed. But is there any suggestion on the part of the Chura management team to make a trail that they think is appropriate to honor Axel England Jr.?
Yeah,
Or is the idea just to shut down access, period?
they've made a specific statement that access to the beach, to Old Home Beach is one of their missions. So they want to continue to have, they want to have access. So we just need to improve the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail to make it appropriate in being accessible, especially at the toe, where right now it could be dangerous to access Old Home Beach.
Other questions from the public? Comments?
Aaron again, I've just got a quick question. The management plan specifically mentions the city paying funding for a handrail on page 57. I'm just curious, is that still around? And is that part of this discussion for the Axel Lindgren Trail? And if not, maybe since we have a little bit more time to solve that trail's issues, just that, because I think that it says that management plan will help deter people as well as make it a safer access point.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that is what we would call the mid-range to long-range plan. So yes, that is on the agenda, but that could very well be part of with the reopening of the trail. So we'll see how that plays out. But right now, the main emphasis has been what we're calling the emergency TMT meetings in order to facilitate opening Old Home Beach again and opening access to Old Home Beach. So currently focusing on Parker Creek Trail.
Other comments, questions from the general public? All right, seeing none, bringing it back to council. We have really tonight is just a discussion update, and so there's no action, although I think we'll all be very interested to hear what happens by Memorial Day. And thanks for the continued hard work on bringing everybody together.
And we are planning on having another council meeting. I think it's the 23rd, which will be 2 weeks from today, because we're going through budget. Yeah,
That's okay.
So we'll be able to give you another update then.
Excellent.
It'll also be after the 7th meeting of the planning commission. And then, of course, that's when the CDP will be issued. And then Trevor's still on the line. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Trevor, that I might have missed or whatever?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Glad that you were able to stay on for us.
Thank you, Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor's going to be preparing the CDP and it'll be on the agenda next week. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Make a motion to return it to the mayor.
I second.
And I second.
All right, so we are on our last agenda item. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
We're on our last agenda item, which is the presentation update regarding the FY23 budget and upcoming FY24 budget preparation timeline. So that Gabe, all right, take it away.
Thanks. I'll give it a shot. First of all, I appreciate, might sound a little odd, but I do appreciate having this task, this project. It is kind of an honor to be primary architect of the city budget, of course, with quite a bit. And I take it really seriously. I wanted to just start this year like we do pretty much every year in early May, just setting some expectations for the next couple of weeks. It's my understanding that our target is to have a complete budget by June.
Yeah,
13th, our regular meeting on June 13th, which means we have tonight to sort of kick it off, and we've got the next meeting on the 23rd, which will really dive in deeper to some of the numbers. And then hopefully come back in June with what we intend to be our spending plan for 2024. I'd like to introduce each budget year with a little narrative, a lot of narrative, because I like turning numbers into words. Because numbers sometimes get a little complicated when you dive in super deep. And then people like me come up for air and try to explain things, and it just doesn't make sense, you know? So I try to put it into words, and I know this is probably a little hard to read up there, but I just want to use this as my guide because I don't want to spend too much time tonight talking. I want to share some of the core with the council and the public to provide me with some direction as we move forward with this in the next 2 weeks, which I consider to be like my cocoon time, to go deep into the numbers and then come back, you know, at the meeting on May the 23rd with some real figures in front of us. So just to recap, the budget is a spending plan that's intended to reflect the goals and priorities of the city council and to keep up with this increasing pressure of the state and big brother, let's just call it, governments that set the framework for our own government operation. The forces compete for resources, and the balance between mandatory and discretionary spending continues to tilt in the favor of mandatory. The city, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling governmental prophecy where it seems like the more we get, the more demands there are on higher government and laws by which we have to operate. And I'm sensing, you know, over time that I've worked here, more and more of that pressure, which when I do the numbers, sometimes I see that there's less money for discretionary because we're constantly spending time and energy and resources following the rules. So with every spending, oftentimes we have side effects, and having to react quickly to employment needs, inflation, and social dynamics during this COVID era has brought subsequent growing pains to this city government and its operations that I think are going to demand a lot of our attention in this coming year and beginning now. So we're going to examine what resources exist that can be used to navigate higher government red tape, fine-tune personnel structure, which is something that's high on my priority list, stay on task with long-term priorities and meet the growing needs of the city based on current and forecasted economic trends. The first step to do that every year, at least this year, is to look back at the big picture summary, which I included, pulled up on the screen here. The big picture summary from what we determined was our target this year. We determined that last year. And looking at the current year, measuring achievements and shortfalls, deviations in the council spending plan, also identifying operation changes or unexpected revenue windfalls that have modified our course. So the three goals for this meeting is to examine the financial statements, which were in the packet, which I think Mayor Kelly mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. You didn't have to pull it because we're going to talk about, but we're going to have it to reference. That's one of my main tools when I'm monitoring the budget. We'll also review highlights in spending or not unspending in revenues in primary departments, kind of like the trails. Priority. And we'll hopefully plot a course that will lead us to an adopted budget. There's a couple of tools we use when we're doing the budgets. The first, I said, the financial statements. That's what I use to kind of use as a guide. And that's how we determine when we get hundreds of invoices throughout the year. That's where we, the coding of those invoices is determined by our budget, and the budget has corresponding numbers and funds attached to it. And throughout the year, I use those financial statements, which are posted in the packet, as a guide and as a way to sort of chart and monitor that course. The audit every year is sort of it's a really nice verification of what we did. And if we monitored correctly, booked everything correctly, and then we have an independent auditor, which is a huge help to come and put it all together for us and tell us if we did it. Those are our two primary tools that we use to guide our budget preparation. So the big picture summary, which I'll throw up on the screen here, is sort of the snapshot, the bird's eye view. I don't know if it's my eyes or if it's blurry or what. But, so it's the big picture view of what we intended we would end up with at the end of this year. Now, just taking a quick look at our financial statements, if you look at our main general fund, primary funds, the admin, which covers a lot of our, what we consider keeping the lights on, the utilities for government buildings, excluding the water fund. You look at our consultants, you look at city attorney, city engineer, building inspector, quite a heavy load of our administrative staff. Salaries are covered by the admin fund. Public works, fire and police are covered. Those funds have landed. If I just whip through, if I can get there pretty quick, the financial statements, you'll see that they are, you read these financial statements and you'll see, that most of them general fund admin. You'll see that most of them in the bottom corner down here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but they show we're landing at about 40% of what we expected to spend. That's the admin. So when I look at this, I say, okay, overall, some of our funds are overspent, some are underspent, but in general, we are underspent in that category. And then admin, the police budget, we've got 65% left to spend. In fire, we have 60% down here in the corner yet to spend. And in public works, we're at 30% roughly left to spend. And these, as you can see, these figures are through March 31st. So 3/4 of the way through the year, I look at these and I say, okay, we're on track for what we budgeted. Now, if we go back to our revenue, just want to touch on our revenues. Our revenues, if you look down here on the bottom corner, you can see that year to date, this column right here, we go down and we see $568,000 is what we've received so far year to date. We've got a target of 731, leaving approximately 22% remaining. And I anticipate every bit of that will come in this year. So going back to the, easier to navigate, but going back to the big picture, we anticipated last year that we would end up in the hole $26,000. But my estimates this year is that we're going to end up probably with a slight surplus of $50,000 to $60,000. So that's been a trend over the last few years where we budget conservatively with our revenues and we budget generously with our expenditures so that we end up, not biting off too much more than we can chew or running short. And the way I see this year so far is we're going to have a little bit of a surplus to move forward. Some of the goals that we had set for ourselves this year are listed under what I wrote as highlights. And general fund, I think we pretty much nailed almost all of them, with the exception of continued progress on the general plan. I think we are continuing our progress. I just, I think that once the council hears that progress, I think I can check that off the box. But as you know, we're not necessarily seeing that progress. I know they're working on it, but that was just one thing in this list. Funding the city manager, clerk, project manager, assistants, clerk, and consultants. We had transitioned the assistant clerk position to full-time, and we did that. The attorney, I put the city attorney as listed as a fully involved staff member, but he has not been as involved this year as he was last year, which has put us, it put a significant, let's call it a reserve back in our budget. I don't want to I'm knock on wood, but we haven't had to use the city attorney too much, and we budgeted high on the expenses relative to the city attorney. Public safety. If you look, we pretty much nailed that list. We renewed the contract with the county sheriff's department for a 24/7 coverage. Our budget included discretionary funds for private security, which we've now pulled the trigger on. As you can see, here's one: emphasis on enforcement of current laws plus amended ordinance related to overnight parking and related restrictions. I think we've got a little work to do on that this year still, but I would say that was a success. Public Works, we concluded the stormwater phase construction. We set 10,000 aside for trail maintenance. We had a little money set aside for the Civic Club room update. I would say that with regards to excluding those last two, the money's still in the bank, so it wasn't a loss. The water, I think that's kind of where we all want to talk, what we want to talk about. And I would say that the water fund needs a hyper focus this year. And that's really where I want to really drill down and hopefully get some more direction from the city council on and management, frankly, to just sort of determine where we're going to go. But when I go through the checklist of our highlights and what we were anticipating for the water fund, other than drought monitoring and outreach, I think we were just on a ventilator for the whole year. We weren't doing anything big, with the exception of our grant team back there, who is putting big picture stuff together. I think this year we really missed the mark. In fact, we budgeted for, I was a little reluctant to do so, but we only budgeted for like, a month or two at the current contractor's rate. And we missed at that big time. So we didn't do any valve replacements. We did do Humboldt creek flow monitoring, and luckily we had, everybody did a rain dance and we got water flow. So as far as everything else in our big picture list, I think the grant funding, the grant projects have lived up to par. In summary, I think we really nailed, or right now we're on track to have our revenues and our expenses in the admin portion of the city functioning like we intended to, but the water fund is where we continue to hemorrhage. Looking at the audited financial statements from last year, it looks like we had spent roughly of our reserve about $1 million in the water fund. I want to say we spent close to, it's kind of complicated with depreciation and some of these imaginary numbers that go into the budget and how we determine how much money was lost. But just cash alone, I think we spent, I should say, overspent approximately $300,000. And then with depreciation and some of the other auditing formulas that you use, I think the auditor picked that number up closer to 300. This year, we're probably on track for another hit of about that much. So the way I see it, we've got about 1.5 years left after this of our reserves that should be spent or could be spent. And then we're going to have to go hunt for money unless we do something now this year. So with that said, I guess the numbers, my next step, just so everyone knows, like I said, the cocoon, I dive in now, starting tomorrow, for the next 1.5 weeks until we prepare for the next meeting. I dive into what we call the general ledger. The general ledger is sort of a really horrible spreadsheet with thousands and thousands of cells. And it pretty much identifies every invoice, every expense, where it went. And the reason why I do that as part of our budget kickoff is so that when I present to you the draft numbers, then I can give you that information with relative certainty. Because, it's easy to miscode an invoice, to transform a number and the bookkeeper gets it and she puts it in and it ends up over here in a certain category. I look for big ticket numbers primarily, but what you're going to see at the next meeting is a draft of where we're at, where we think we're going, how much money we think we're going to have. And then I'll be ready for any kind of suggestions in direction that you'd like me to go in terms of, let's just call it discretionary money. And then also, I think it'll be your job as council to give us staff direction as to go, where to go, and how to prioritize our attention. So with that said, pass it over to you for questions, comments.
Right, thank you. Other questions, counselors for Gabe?
One quick question, Gabe, the material you've got on the screen, is that supposed to be in our packet?
It's in my presentation material. I don't believe you have it in your packet.
It was in the packet that I accessed just before the meeting. I always look at it first and then if there's anything else. So I always get it when the announcement comes out and then I get it that night, like the night of the council meeting, just in case anything was added. So download it again and chuck the old one. And you'll
I
have it.
just did it in real time and I don't think it's there, but we can.
I sometimes what'll. This is
Is that Adele?
Yeah.
just a side note, but I think sometimes what happens is if browser doesn't get refreshed, sometimes it'll go back to whatever you had end up maybe an hour prior.
Yeah, if you put it there and I'm not finding it, it's an error on my part.
This is useful, much more useful than the numbers issues.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll be able to articulate this again, kind of in a moving forward basis at the next.
And for everybody's benefit, can you refresh our memory on how that reserve? That was a council decision back in some year. And I don't remember exactly how we found the $2 million to dump it. I know we made a policy that will keep a reserve to keep the lights on and another one for capital. But can you tell us how that money gets put back into the reserve?
So there, Becky, I know Becky's breathing back there. So, here we go. But there's two different reserve funds. You know, there's the general fund admin portion of the city's revenues, right? So there's occupancy taxes, sales tax, property taxes. Those are what we call unrestricted funds. Those funds can be spent however the council chooses to spend. That pot of money has a very specific reserve structure that is outlined, that was outlined by the council. There's a resolution passed that said this money is to be used in the following 4 categories. One of those categories, just for instance, was emergency reserve. Was one that was called the budget stabilization, you know, and it was broken up, at least the, you know, 1.5 million or more in the city's general fund reserve was broken up in chunks of about $500,000. So that fund is healthy. We're very solid and resilient in that fund. And that's because our revenue sources aren't as volatile as they are, such as our occupancy tax, depending on whether or not there's COVID, people are coming here spending money or not. They have been pretty predictable. But the water fund reserve has that same separate decision-making process attached to it. That $1.06 million that was sitting in that reserve, Becky and I have been discussing lately. We've seen some resolutions where the council had actually allocated that money to be for capital improvements. And that was because of, I think, maybe some of the grants that we've been looking after. You know, when the grant agencies see a giant pot of money sitting in your financials, they're like, well, why do you need this money? So the council had to basically show what it was reserved for, as opposed to just having it sit there and someone checking it. And capital reserves, capital improvements, if I'm saying this right, Becky, is what the majority of that money, it looks to have been intended for. But it doesn't mean the council can't undo that with an action, but it looks like we might, according to the paperwork that I'm seeing, we might be kind of dipping into that capital reserve, our capital improvement reserve. And capital improvements, as you know, are typically physical things.
Pipes.
Not, you know,
Pipes and
consultants.
filters. Yeah.
Unless those consultant fees are directly related to a project. So, yeah, that's where we're getting into a little bit of like the red line. And that's what I'm anticipating we will continue to do if we don't find a different course.
So with the council's, agreement here, I'd love to see that ordinance come back to the council, because Jack and I were here, but the rest of us weren't. Just so we can be reminded, and it's not like we have to stay with it. But it gives us a framework that basically has kind of saved our hide through these funky times. And I think we need to look at it closely since we're talking about money and see if one is still relevant. Two, we need to adjust the language so that we're not kind of hurting ourselves to save money. I mean right? We were hurting ourselves by not getting grants by the way we saved our money. So if we could bring that back for, if that, it could be sent to us as counselors so we can review it. I'm not asking for a full agenda item, but I think it's really useful for us to know how we replenish the rainy day funds and what we're doing with it and so on. Because that's really gotten us through some funky times.
Can I add something real quick? I didn't completely answer your question. You asked about replenishing those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've had a conversation, a good start with, I believe it's University of North Carolina, is that right? That's helped us with a rate structure analysis. It's not the official rate structure analysis that we really need to embark on here soon, but they did a tremendous job creating some great spreadsheets that give us, just kind of show us the line and how the money is disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
So replenishing that, there will have to be some intention built into the new adjusted rate structure, which we haven't done in too long, to build that reserve back.
And when you say adjusted rate, in this case, are you talking about the water rate?
Water rates, yeah, water rates.
Yeah, I just want to confirm.
I'm sorry.
The water rates. So if there's an adjustment to the water rates, that could increase the funding then that goes into the pool, so to speak.
And I know it sounds, I'm kind of painting this sort of warning sign on the water fund, but we all know that's true. It's not a mystery. But on the flip side, that money had been set aside and it had grown, and previous councils anticipated times at some point. And that's the whole point. I mean, yeah, we would all like to, I think the council at that time would like to see that money go somewhere else. But at the same time, we've got this tremendous grant acquisition power, that has kind of born out of the early 2000s, that has helped use other money to do some of the hard skates. And then the soft costs now is what that reserves has been there for. So
yeah, I mean,
that's a very positive thing. Yeah.
Well, we knew the tanks were getting old and the pipes were leaking and the filters were 70,000 a piece. So we said, we got to have a way to replace this. So that's my historical perspective anyway. So anyway, if we can have that for context, I think that
would be great.
Again, the water and the sort of the daily operations funds both need to be considered in this.
Gabe, can you add the narrative you gave us to the May 23rd meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you want to talk about priorities at that next meeting? And Gabe, like if we see anything where we want to dial it up or dial it down, or do you want to hear that now so you can kind of factor that into your GL?
Yeah.
What's best process for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, I guess, for me, when I'm looking at the checkbook and I say, oh, I got this money and I got to spend the bills, and then what do I got left? What can I do with it? So that's one approach. And that would be at the next one.
Yeah.
But it does help me, Eli, and any of the staff members that participate in this process, it does help to kind of know where your heads are at, because discretionary projects are, I mean, you're representing the city and people come to you for certain things. And Katie and I know Cheryl have really lassoed this dog issue, so when a conversation comes up to redo the dog ordinance, that's time and that's energy, that's a priority, and those are resources needing to be dedicated. So that is something that I think we all would like to see, like, okay, what are the priorities? I know, Steve, you brought up at the last meeting, what's up with our 72-hour parking? Where's our sign? Well, what's going on with Edward Street? We got a busy summer coming. Well, that took time and energy and it's sort of kind of fizzled. So we need to know these things. That would be what I'd like to hear now, or underground utilities on Underwood. Let's hear more about that. Those kind of-
Yeah,
So anything that's on your list.
Just Underwood, Aaron, just under. You don't have any view on View Street, so what do you, I mean?
speed humps, yeah. All right, well, I guess I if anybody has anything like top of mind, otherwise you can kind of think it over for the next meeting. I would mention that I think we'll be investing more in some of the services like police and fire. I would expect that we're gonna have an increase in funding needed for those kind of basic services. And so we can talk more about that. I think that town hall could use a little bit of a facelift, but it looks like you had that in your budget. It's just,
New windows.
We did, and just this week, yeah.
yeah, it's just getting, getting the contractors and stuff. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if the dog issue will require a lot of funding. It actually could generate some revenue if we start citing people.
But I think Gabe's comment is that licensing takes people, right?
Okay.
If we're gonna have, 100 people coming into the town hall in a short amount of time to get licenses and a tracking system and the whole thing, I'm right? Am I overspeaking?
That's part of it, but also, when we're, I don't know what I was telling this the other day, I said, but I think I said something like, can we hold off on the dog thing until maybe next month or the month after? Because it creates a massive bottleneck in our abilities to do other things.
Yeah.
So it might not be just money, but then there's opportunities that are being missed as a result of us focusing on that. And dogs are people's children. Last time we did this, it was a zoo. Comments, and it really locked up a month or two of our productivity. So when we hear that from the council, it's easy for us to say, okay, we got to park these other things. This is the priority.
Yeah, I don't know that we can hold off until the budget's done to do that sort of thing if it's going to create a bottleneck. Is there, though, to Steve's point, is there going to be, to do more dog licensing? Let's say you got 100 of them in August or something, or September. Do we need more staff to handle that, or do you think we can do that with our current staff?
We can do it with our current staff.
And I'd suggest we also raise it to 20 instead of 15.
This is not an agenda.
Okay.
We certainly like to include it.
It's kind of budget related, but kind of not. So
Not at all.
we'll hold it until we talk more deeply about dogs. So we dig in to talk about dogs. All right. You guys have anything you want to?
I would just ask maybe each of the counselors, and maybe we can reach out to Jack too, is each of us come with 3 or 4 goals that we want to see for the city. I was looking at city goals from 21, 22. And we did a lot. But it was a sort of a unified discussion, and it wasn't goals about what we want to do as a city sort of all over the place. It was goals of the city that have budgetary considerations, right? So if we have any, I think we should each come next, 2 weeks from now with 3 or 4 goals ready to talk and like, hey, let's see if we can. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have those goals in the city packet. I mean, if the counselors were able to do that, it's just to submit our 4 goals so that we see, and that's when we see when we're in alignment or whatever, but just to get the conversation going. And then how does the money support those goals? So I would ask us to do that, at least consider that.
Right. So everybody can, that'll give you time to talk to some folks around town and their input as well. And so with that, I'll open up. Speaking of the public, are there any goals and priorities you all? Aaron,
You're surprised.
Come on, Aaron.
Just a thought with the water reserves, and I don't know if possible, but if I understood Eli's report with the estimate we've gotten back for the tank project, the city has really committed to sticking with our existing water system, right? And I would really hate us to be short-sighted and decrease the size of the tank. Sounds like we might have eliminated one of the 2 pipes that was recommended initially, and going from the Cadillac to the Pinto. They both get water out of my tap, but I would encourage us to, maybe if that funding's available, to dip into those reserves, those capital improvements, right? Those are things that we can spend money on and make that part of this budgetary discussion, so we don't get a smaller system now, and in 10 years, 20 years, like, man, that would have been cool to have had that second pipe in a bigger tank, that kind of. And it might already be a discussion and a thought process, I just want to put it out there.
not to micromanage the discussion, but it wasn't downsizing the water storage. It was, instead of buying a 300,000 gallon tank to replace 100,000, 150, to buy a 200,000 gallon tank to replace a 150. So still working towards growth.
Right.
Right. So
It's not.
That's in the water advisory committee. My understanding is we're looking at buying 2 like-size tanks long-term. And
Yeah.
making sure we're not dropping 50,000 here and then have a more expensive tank later to meet that desire that we're going for. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Other comments or? Oh,
Good evening, Chris Slade, Trinidad residents, and I've got 2 young children, one age 4 and one age 11 months, who can't play pickleball, which means that there's very few locations around town where they can, play and be young children. I realize that there's more complexity to this issue than just spending money, but it would be great if there is, some investment or at least some thought about how to invest in, like a playground or some place where kids can play. There is some.
There is a plan. I don't know if you heard this earlier, but there is a plan to put in the pickleball court here. And it's, yes, okay.
Still, I think they probably have several decades before that's.
Yeah.
No, there is an agreement where, when school is not in session at Trinidad School, kids can go from there to play on the playground, but the public is not allowed on the school grounds between basically 9 and 6 on school days, which means that for 9 months of the year, there's no place where during most of the day hours, kids can play. So it'd be really nice to, again, I realize it's more complex than just budgeting. But it'd be nice to find some greater solution, some way to allocate some space for what seems to be an increasing number of young kids.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's good feedback.
Yeah, this is really Margaret. This morning I was reading through the board packet of another agency, the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. And they were briefly discussing various issues, including Trinidad. And they were talking about the last problem, the major problem that the city had on Scenic Drive was caused by the slumping. I was wondering, is this going to be an ongoing issue? And if so, how is this going to be addressed as a budget? Is there a budget, is there money set aside for this potentially ongoing issue?
Yeah. It is the city's water plant, but it is beyond the city limits going for the Trinidad Rancheria property. And the Trinidad Rancheria is out to Indian Health Services. And Indian Health Services representative out of Arcata is working on getting funding to help mitigate, but basically not only place the pipe, but try to have a solution so it could survive beyond the normal erosion. So, but yes, they will be. That's the plan. Is that Indian Health Services will be paying for that effort.
And there was also, wasn't there, we were thinking about moving the pipe to the other side of the road so that it'd be less impacted by the slumping.
Right. Right. That's one option being considered.
Okay. All right, other public comments for us to think about in terms of priorities, and this will be an ongoing discussion. We'll talk about it today. We talked about it. We'll also talk about it in 2 weeks in the special meeting, and then finalize in the June meeting. So there'll be more opportunities. And so, as counselors, we can reach out to a lot of folks in town and try to hear what kind of what the goals and priorities are. And to Steve's point, bring them back next time around.
If you want, I was just going to interject something if we're done with this topic.
Yes.
So basically, when we were talking about trails, we looked at Sherry Provolt wasn't there, but Sherry Provolt's there now.
Hey.
So I don't know, Steve, if you want to tell her, if you want me to tell her about the Trails Committee representative from the Yurok tribe, but we haven't, or Jack even. So since Jack is the
Miss Provo could just listen to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Eli. I was trying to get on. I had a different engagement earlier and I was hoping to catch the trails conversation. So I appreciate an update. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I'll be glad to let you know what we discussed. We're concerned that the last meeting, we didn't have enough for a quorum. We're missing a number of people. So we felt like we wanted to look at the Trails Committee again and make sure we have people. And one of the things we said is we have not had a UROC representative as long as I've been on the committee that's actually come to a meeting. So the suggestion was maybe to talk to you about trying to get a tribal member to come to the meeting so we can get this, so we can make some goals and look ahead and try to do something with the trails. So we thought we'd reach out to you, and you, now that you're here, we're reaching out.
Thank you. I'll bring that up to council. We have a council meeting on Friday, but I'll agendize it and it'll probably be the end of the May that I can bring it forward to council to think about either appointing a different council member or asking a Yurok tribal member in the area to serve on the Trails Committee. Can you remind me the date of those meetings?
I have to, we have it every 3 months.
Yeah, and they just had one this month, so it'll be a couple more months.
We reported it. This is the first time we reported what we did last month. So it's going to be a couple of months from now.
So they're quarterly?
Yes.
Okay.
Vice Chair Myers was the representative.
Yeah.
Just for context.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I will bring that forward. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so we are on the part of our agenda for future agenda items. Does anybody have anything, excuse me, losing my voice, to tee up?
One of the things I'd like to get back to is maybe getting a report from the Pacific Watershed. Yeah, we haven't heard much about what's going on with the water system beyond what the immediate problems, but we have a lot that we're working on. It seems like it's drifted away, and it'd be nice to bring that back again.
I agree 100%. And I think it's time that we maybe could meet up with PWA again. And, just that those meetings tend to be quite productive. So Eli, can you try to get that? Thank you very much.
And then I think we'll probably have a presentation in June around the community emergency response team. So as many of you know, we had all the power outages and storms last winter. So we're trying to, get ahead of it this year and get ready. And I'd love to talk about that. And Aaron is my partner in crime on that. So, and then we also have some folks from the CERT team that who will come in and present. See, maybe a grants update. I don't know that needs to be in the next month or two, but maybe, the one that Becky did that was so great, where she just listed out, she had the questions about all the different grants and showed all the grants and works and kind of where we're at. I think that was really interesting. So we could maybe do one in the fall or something. We talked about the Trails Committee. So yeah, that's all I have. Katie, from you, anything you want to talk about? Did you want to have the dogs on the agenda, or do you want to? Well, I just want to make sure we.
Well, just about, I'm not exactly sure what this would be for June. And
or subsequent. It's future
agenda item. Well, I would like to get the lights thing plan down, and then I would like to also hear. I think Eli, you were checking with the lawyers about what we might do in terms of upgrading our ordinances.
Yeah, as far as the ordinance, right?
We should hear by then, perhaps.
Well, part of it is also checking with the county to see what they're up to. Because ideally, animal control would like to have our ordinance either mirror the counties or mirror the state. At least in certain provisions, especially for the hearing process. So that's part of it. So what I would say is if we separate the two, number one, regarding the dog licensing, we can handle that on an administrative level with the assistance of individual council members. Then,
Need it down on the agenda.
right, for the licensing part, but for the ordinance part, yeah, I will check with our attorney for a future meeting. And as Cheryl had indicated, June will hopefully be finalizing at our first council meeting in June, finalizing the budget. So as a result, the earliest we'll address the dog ordinance would be possibly July. But we'll see. I'd like to bring it when we do have something of substance to discuss.
I want to make it clear that the reason I sort of like a dog on the bone about this is not to tie up that time and money, but when I'm out walking, I hear every day on this subject, and I think in terms of being responsive to the people in town, we can't delay it, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, because what I hear is city council doesn't do anything, and I know that's not true. But if there's too much lag time, you have to get it out. They're going to lose. Persistent. It's not that I think anybody's going to necessarily get bitten again real soon, I hope.
Yeah, well, the measures that are taken are a variety of measures. The ordinance is only one kind of measure. And really, the goal mostly with the ordinance would be to try to coordinate it with animal control, so it's effective on our end. In addition to that, of course, we got the signage out. I'm not sure if we have the signage ready for the STRs that do have pets allowed, but we will make sure that that's happening soon. And then, of course, reaching out with the licensing, I think that's important. I do want to note that the signage that we got, we ended up getting 50 signs, and the original locations were around 24, where the trails are, and also where the pet doggy stations are. So we expanded that, doubled it. And because of the size of the sign, 7 inches basically, it allowed us to put it on the regular signage that we have in the city for traffic, but to be what I call pedestrian friendly and not to obstruct from the drivers. We didn't want to have too large of a sign that when drivers are coming, they're trying to read that and then they lose sight of where they're driving. So it's intended just to serve the pedestrians as they're walking, and hopefully, maybe like on Trinity Street, when they open their car door and they see the sign and they say, oh, gee, I got to get that leash for my dog, especially for visitors. I think that's the intent, is to really maximize the word out there to the people that normally are not here and haven't encountered and been aware of the issues that we have. So hopefully it'll be effective. But if you look at it across the board, there are a number of ways that it is being addressed. So, just to let people know. And hopefully, and like I said, I was encouraged when Pacific Coast Security, Gene said that he was looking around and the dogs that he saw were all on leashes. So that's encouraging. And that's why I looked at where is the loophole, and the loophole appeared to be, people before they start walking to take their dog on a leash, opening the door of a park or of a house, and then, or a hole in the fence, things where, we haven't covered everything. And then the dog licensing is a very good point. So this way, we try to get as much information as possible between rabies shots, ideally have a picture of the dog, some, description of the type of dog it is. So that this way, if someone spots a particular dog, not only does it help, address the problem. What happened recently is Jack Tuttle, all of a sudden 2 dogs showed up in his neighborhood off leash. So he contacted me. He says that these look familiar. And I checked with Jennifer and myself, and it wasn't familiar. So as a result, I told him that. So he said he was going to walk around town, see if he can see if someone, because he said it looked like their paws were coming from the beach. They had some sand on their paws. So he walked around the beach and everything. In the meantime, I called animal control, And I told them, I says, have you gotten a report of 2 missing dogs, one's a German Shepherd? And they said, yes, they did. So they gave me the number of the owner and we were able to contact the owner. And the owner was just thrilled because they apparently left her house stagecoach the night before and must have wandered along the beach and then came up by where his house is. So the more information we get, not only is it enforcement of problems, but it's also to help get these happy solutions where we're able to reunite pet owners with their pets.
It's another service provided by the city council.
So you are the dog catcher.
Yeah, so we are
You're the dog catcher.
we're like assistant dog catchers. Steve, did you have something about the trail advisory that went, okay. All right, then I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We must bring it.